The Occult, the Order of Nine Angles, Terrorism, and International Relations. I'm making this video quickly. I'll start with, I did a recent interview with a educational Twitch streamer called Johnny Scarlett. I'll link the interview I did in the description to the video later, and highly recommend watching it. It is 3.5 hours, and the first half an hour or so I was half asleep because I had to get up and do it at her schedule, which was 5-6 a.m. in the morning. So yeah, once I wake up I get into some interesting things. One of those things is, since the Abramelin stuff is done and the Christian stuff, which was essentially to try and bring these kind of esoteric ideas into an audience that wouldn't normally have access or interest in it by using a pop culture figure. I've kind of done that, and I'm somebody who's not here to just repeat the same things again. There's another field that I'm involved with in outside of this, which is, and I'll go into this more later in other videos, which is my involvement in the field of international relations. I have lived in various countries overseas. I mostly specialize in the Middle East, South Asia, so India, Pakistan, and Central Asia, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, etc. And focusing mostly on terrorism. And I'm going to be getting into these things in future videos. But how do they correlate to anything I've talked about for the past year on YouTube? Well, to me, a terrorist organization is essentially a secret magical society of sorts. I mean, the word occult literally just means secret. And I focus mostly on Sunni Islamic terrorism, Al-Qaeda, and militant groups that are now in control, like the Taliban, and I focus quite a lot on the Taliban. Anyway, how a splinter cell terrorist organization like Al-Qaeda operates is very similar to a decentralized secret magical society, and I've got an example as to how this correlates. There actually is a secret magical society that is decentralized and is set up in the same way organizations like Al-Qaeda are set up. And there is this particular secret magical society performs or takes responsibility for terrorist attacks that are going on at the moment, that have increased in frequency since 2018, and that organization is the magical secret society called the Order of Nine Angles, or the O9A. People who are members usually refer themselves as Niners. They are kind of a theistic Satanist organization claiming to have ties with pagan roots, pre-Christian. They are also heavily involved in something called esoteric Hitlerism, and yes, that's a thing. And they have connections to a militant neo-Nazi organization that I have had personal problems with in the past, called Combat 18. Now, the Order of Nine Angles, most of their material is essentially, it's extremely anti-Jewish. And what they have done is try and take the Western esoteric tradition and strip it. So mostly Crowley's systems of AA and the OTO, Thelema, and neo-paganism. And they've tried to strip the Western esoteric tradition of anything relating to Judaism. and by proxy Christianity, because they see Christianity as a offshoot of Judaism, more Messianic, Second Temple Rabbinical Judaism. Now, the problem I have with the O9A system is they've essentially stripped everything from the Western esoteric tradition, because Kabbalism is essentially the entire thing almost. You can't be involved with any of this stuff without doing something that is from the Hermetic Kabbalah. And what they've done is they've tried to replace it with another system which is, in my opinion, thoroughly unsatisfactory. Now, there are some aspects of the O9A that are extremely interesting, and especially their insight roles. And the way that they operate is the same way a splinter cell terrorist organization like Al-Qaeda operates. They have a kind of central figure of sorts. Similar to with Al-Qaeda, they had bin Laden and they had Zawahiri, who was recently airstriked in Kabul in Afghanistan as he was being harbored by the current Taliban regime. And yeah, that's one thing I can give credit to the Biden administration for doing, is killing Zawahiri. It's sort of put Al-Qaeda into disarray, as there is no clear succession anymore. And Al-Qaeda branches off into the idea of, bin Laden or Zawahiri as this central figure. And then it splinters off into smaller groups, like Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which is mostly operated since the late 2000s out of Yemen. Al-Qaeda in Sub-Saharan Africa, there's Al-Qaeda in India, there's Al-Qaeda in Pakistan, there's Al-Qaeda in Southeast Asia. And they are all connected to this Salafist, Islamic fundamentalist, extremist ideology and personalities as the central idea around the organization, and it splinters off. Now, the O9A operates in the same way. They have, instead of cells, their cells, because they have been designated a terrorist organization now. A lot of the reason for that is the people have claimed responsibility, done things like joining the military, like the US Marine Corps, for instance. And someone a couple of years ago, I think it was, essentially joined the US Marine Corps and killed a bunch of people and claimed O9A affiliation. The O9A sort of central doctrine, I'm not going to get into it too much now. They have these things called insight roles, which are very interesting and could be utilized for magical purposes outside of the kind of testing system the O9A has. So say if you get involved in an O9A cell, you become part of what they call a Nexium. And the central figurehead in the O9A is Anton Long, who is most likely a man called David Mamet, I think. And he has written the majority of the material. He has, under the pseudonym Anton Long, he also became a Muslim with the background, and he really pushed for Islamist and terrorist acts, which is very interesting. I have no idea if the guy was just doing an insight role or if he legitimately was a Muslim. You can't really know with this kind of stuff. But he's a very interesting man. He doesn't claim responsibility, but everyone knows it's him. they have affiliations with militant organizations, just like Al-Qaeda does. Al-Qaeda has the affiliation with the Taliban. Even though the Taliban are a slightly different fundamentalist form of Islam than what Al-Qaeda propagates. However, the opinion of the ex-leader of Al-Qaeda, al-Zawahiri, on certain people established within the new Taliban government carried huge weight within the Taliban's process of who to choose for certain roles. And the main difference between Al-Qaeda and the Taliban is Taliban are militant. Now they are a legitimate government, the Taliban emerged of Afghanistan. But the Taliban are from a different school of Sunni Islamic jurisprudence than Al-Qaeda and the typical Sunni terrorist organizations. They come from the Diabani school. Well, it's not. Well, that's more of a philosophy. They come from the Hanafi school of Islamic jurisprudence. There's 4 in Sunni Islam, and I will go into the Taliban properly later on in another video. The point I'm trying to make is that when the Taliban were in the insurgency for the past 20 years, until recently, they were very deeply connected and tied with Al-Qaeda. Now, the O9A operates in the same way as Al-Qaeda, and they have their own militant groups that are associated with them, particularly that of Combat 18, which is a British neo-Nazi organization. Combat 18 standing for Combat 1A, referring to English gematria, which is really ironic because gematria is most famously used in Kabbalism by converting Hebrew letters into certain numbers and having the significance of those numbers to certain things. And I'll go into that. I've gone into it before, but Combat 1A, Combat AH, Combat Adolf Hitler. But I just find that kind of funny that they are using something, even though it's a really pathetic cipher. But anyway, the Combat 18 immigrated to Australia, and I had to deal with them way back, because one of my friends actually became a member, but then he fucked him over, and he became incredibly disillusioned, which was good. And then they tried to kill him. And I had problems with them. They didn't like me because of being Slavic, naturally. They didn't see me as a human being. So I don't really support Combat 18 at all. I've literally gone to war with them when I was a teenager. The O9A operates the most paranoid magical system you could ever possibly imagine. You're meant to be in groups, Nexiums, your little splinter cell, and essentially test everyone you are associated with in an Nexium, and also to test random people to see if they are an Opfer. An Opfer is German for sacrifice, because remember even though they're theistic Satanists, I'm really surprised that New Satanic Panic has not come out because of the Order of Nine Angles. I'm really surprised, because for the first time since the Process Church of the Final Judgment, we actually have a satanic secret society that is satanic. Well, sort of. They claim they are. I've got nothing against... I'm not attacking the O9A. I'm using them as an example to bridge towards the stuff I'm going to be going into in the future. But yeah, with regards to the paranoid system of the O9A, essentially you have to test everyone around you constantly, which is horrible. I would absolutely hate that, because I've dealt with psychopaths before, and they constantly do that kind of stuff. And they essentially are trying to see if you meet their elitist requirements. And if you fail, you're supposed to kill them. And with regards to terrorism, I mean, they propagate things like one ritual. You walk into, you create an IED, it provides explosive device, and you set it off while you wear, I believe, some black robes, and you hold a pyramid made out of some crystal. I've forgotten which one it is. And you're supposed to be sucking the life energy of everyone you've just killed. Which, and my real issue with organizations like this is vulnerable people get sucked in to this kind of stuff, and they may have potential in other areas of life, but then they are influenced by a group like this and then perform some stupid act of terrorism, like the ones the O9A have done. Just look it up. I will go into them in far more detail in the future, because they're fascinating, especially from an international relations perspective and my occult perspective of all this stuff. However, one thing I will say, they do rip off word for word rituals that Aleister Crowley wrote, and then just change them to make them satanic. And they have constant spelling errors that a friend of mine thinks is some kind of secret cipher or something. But they're interesting, and they do have some good ideas for initiation. Insight rolls are a fantastic idea. However, they utilize insight rolls in the most hardcore way possible, really. Yeah, I bring them up because my field of international relations is focusing on terrorism in Central, South, and South Asia and the Middle East, is, to me, inseparable from my views as somebody involved in occultism. Now, from a professional perspective, I come from what's called a realist background within international relations political philosophy. The realist perspective is pretty cynical, and I will go into it in the future. But yeah, I really recommend watching that interview, because it does bridge a lot of these subject matters. It goes into a lot of things about me that might be interesting to know, and goes into sort of a glimpse of where I'm going, and so is this. And I've been preparing, now that I have had a break, a lot of material about, in particular, Afghanistan, which I think was very interesting, because I see terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda, and I see militant groups like the Taliban as essentially magical organizations. They are through religious fundamentalism, and they operate in the same manner for the most part, particularly Al-Qaeda, as intelligence agencies do, when they do clandestine operations, decentralizing everything, scattering it about into cells. It's fascinating, and I've been doing a lot of work with regard to the current Taliban regime and the history of Afghanistan, which I'm going to be going into with my own kind of slightly occult viewpoint of the whole thing. And I think people find this interesting. And that's why I brought up the Order of Nine Angles, is they are an occult terrorist organization. They exist. And as I said, my work in international relations is inseparable, in my opinion, to the occult and magic. And I hope people will find this interesting and stick with the direction that I am going in. Anyway, thank you for watching.